People love to criticize the police, sometimes for good reason. Sure, authority can be abused, but when things go bad, truly bad, we're the first ones you call. We're the ones who show up in the dark with no idea what we're walking into. I spent 30 years in uniform, retired at 50. That's 3 decades of answering every kind of call you can imagine, some bizarre, some tragic, and a few haunting. This story falls into that last category. It's one I'll never forget. It started like any routine night shift. My partner Steve and I were dispatched to a domestic disturbance call. A neighbor had phoned it in, heard yelling, some banging, nothing too out of the ordinary. These calls weren't usually anything dramatic. If anything, they helped break up the monotony of the night. I never liked dealing with couples mid-argument. Who does? But it came with the job. We arrived at the address. I still remember it clearly, like it's been burned into my memory. Even the street lights seemed dimmer there. The front door was already open, just hanging there, slightly ajar, swaying like it had been left that way in a hurry. As soon as we stepped inside, it hit us, the thick, unmistakable reek of marijuana. But that wasn't all. There was something sharper in the air, chemical and sour. Steve and I exchanged a glance. Could have been meth, maybe coke. Hard to say for sure, but whatever it was, it clung to the walls. "Police!" I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the stale air. "Come on out, we just want to talk." Silence. Then a heavy thump from upstairs. Instinct kicked in. Steve's hand slid to his holster, fingers brushing the grip of his sidearm. I stayed calm, not nervous yet, but I took note of the tension in his jaw. "Let's move quiet," Steve whispered. I nodded. We were always good about trusting each other's instincts. His felt sharp tonight, like a wire pulled too tight. We moved up the staircase slowly. The wood creaked under our boots despite our efforts to stay quiet. At the top, there were 3 doors. 2 of them stood open, revealing empty rooms with unmade beds and clothes strewn on the floor. The 3rd door was closed, and it was right above where we'd heard that thud. I stepped forward, giving it a solid knock. Thump, thump. "Police!" I called again. "Open up!" Nothing. I glanced at Steve. He gave a short nod. So I grabbed the handle, took a breath, and pushed the door open myself. The first thing that hit us was the smell. Thick, putrid, heavy with decay. Even before our eyes could adjust, we knew what we were dealing with. The scent clawed at our throats, sweet and sick and unmistakably wrong. Then we saw it, the body. Even in the shadows, its condition was obvious, bloated, rotting, slack-jawed in death. The outline was slumped near the far wall, like it had just given up and melted into the floor. A shape that didn't belong in a place where people were still supposed to be living. Steve and I instantly drew our weapons, the metallic click of safeties flicking off, echoing louder than they should have. My partner reached out and flicked on the bedroom light, bathing the scene in a harsh yellow glare. Everything looked worse under it, more real. "I'll check the rest," I said hoarsely, my mouth dry. "Keep eyes on this room." He nodded, jaw tight, hand steady but tense. I tried to keep calm, but I could feel my nerves unraveling with each step. A tremor ran through me. My skin felt like it was vibrating. I hated the job in that moment more than I ever had before. Some part of me screamed to get out, to just walk back to the cruiser and drive off. I didn't want to die here. I reached the next door and wrapped my hand around the knob. But I didn't move. My fingers felt fused to it. I stood there, frozen, staring at the door like it might explode the second I opened it. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Finally, I forced my body to act. I shoved the door open with more strength than I meant to. Light. I needed light. I flicked the switch on the wall and blinked as a dim bulb sputtered to life, casting a weak orange glow over the room. Empty. No people. No sound. Just silence so thick it almost had weight. The room was disturbingly small, claustrophobic. No windows, no airflow, just cracked walls, stains on the ceiling, and an old crusted cot shoved against the far wall. It looked more like a holding cell than a bedroom. There wasn't even a blanket. Suddenly, Steve screamed. A sharp, raw sound that ripped through the hallway. I bolted, crossed the hall in seconds, and burst into the room he was in, weapon drawn. And there was someone. A shirtless man, pale and filthy, lying perfectly flat on top of a tall dresser, like he'd been hiding there, waiting, like a predator. His limbs were rigid, his expression blank, staring down at us like we were the intruders. "Down, now!" Steve shouted, voice shaking but commanding. "Get down!" We both had our guns trained on him, but the guy didn't flinch. Then, before I could process it, something yanked at my ankle, hard. My balance gave way, and I nearly dropped. I looked down and froze. A hand, thin and pale, crawling out from beneath the bed, fingers wrapped tightly around my leg. My instincts kicked in. I shouted, lifted my free foot, and drove it down as hard as I could. The heel of my boot connected with the wrist, and the grip loosened just enough. I bent down, reached under the bed, and dragged out the figure. A woman, barely conscious, twitching, her skin pale and patchy. Stringy hair hung over her face like dead vines. Her eyes didn't focus, completely strung out. She looked like she hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. Every inch of her reeked of sweat and chemicals. Whatever she'd taken, it had hollowed her out. She was barely even there. I slapped the cuffs on the woman, her arms limp and barely resisting as I clicked the metal shut. She mumbled something under her breath, words that didn't make sense, like her mind was tangled in static. Steve had the man down and restrained in seconds. He looked smaller off the dresser, like a marionette with its strings cut. But the deadness in his eyes, that didn't change. With both of them secured, we started leading them out. Step by step, we guided the two of them through the house, their bare feet dragging across the floorboards, voices rising in chaotic, guttural screams. It was like they were trying to talk over each other, but neither was saying anything sane. Just noise, relentless noise. We were halfway to the door when it happened, the final surprise. A blood-curdling scream tore through the house from upstairs, a raw, inhuman sound that made my stomach clench. And then, thump, 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 the thunder of footsteps pounding down the staircase. Someone was charging at us, fast. I turned in time to see a wild-eyed man, shirtless, dirty, his face twisted in pure rage, bolting straight for us, a large kitchen knife raised high above his head. His mouth was wide open in a scream, eyes locked on me like I was the one who'd invaded his home. I froze. Just for a second, but that second could have been the end of me. Steve moved like lightning, his instincts firing before I even processed what was happening. He raised his gun and fired. One shot. The man collapsed mid-charge, thudding hard onto the stairs, his knife clattering down a step or two beside him. The house fell into a sudden, sickening silence. Only the sound of my own heartbeat filled my ears. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't just a drug den. This was a full-blown crack house. A trap. A festering pocket of addiction, violence, and something far worse. A place where people stopped being people. Later, the investigation confirmed everything. The dead woman we found upstairs, she'd been murdered by the very man we arrested. He confessed during interrogation, flat and unfeeling, like he was describing someone else's actions. He said she hadn't paid what she owed. That was it. That's all it took for him to kill her. He was sentenced to life in prison, no parole, no second chances. The woman, strung out and broken, got 30 years. I sometimes wonder if she even understood what was happening. As for Steve, he never lost sleep over that shot. He told me once, years later, while sipping from a cracked mug at a diner near the precinct. "I didn't feel bad, not for a second," he said, staring into his coffee like it held the whole truth. "I just took out another piece of trash." And somehow, in the stillness of that moment, I believed him. It was a quiet night on patrol when my partner and I got dispatched to respond to an alarm. The call came from an old office-style building that had been converted into a doctor's clinic, complete with a pharmacy attached to it. Nothing unusual at first glance, just another tripped motion sensor, probably a false alarm. But something about the voice on dispatch gave me pause, just a beat too uncertain. The signal had come from an upstairs office. When we arrived, the key holder was already waiting for us out front, a nervous guy fumbling with a set of mismatched keys. We nodded, did a quick check of the perimeter, and moved in. The main stairs to the upper floor were locked behind a solid interior door, and of course, the key holder didn't have the right key for it. Typical. So we opted to take the elevator. We stepped inside the lift, the kind with flickering lights and that faint mechanical hum that never quite lets you forget you're moving. When the doors slid open on the second floor, we were met with complete darkness. Except for one light. A single fluorescent bulb, buzzing quietly, glowed overhead at the far end of the hallway. Every other fixture was dead. The light didn't so much illuminate the hall as exposed its emptiness, long, narrow, and silent. We started checking the office doors one by one. Each one was shut tight, locked, quiet. No signs of disturbance. Until we reached the very last office. The doorknob turned easily beneath my hand, unlocked. We exchanged a look, and I slowly pushed it open. It led into a large waiting area, dimly lit by the spill of hallway light and the glow from a motion-sensing wall fixture. A dusty reception counter stretched across the room, and behind it was a maze of hallways and exam rooms, 10 or 12 by my count. We moved through each one in silence, clearing them methodically. Every door opened to the same thing: unused rooms, empty furniture, some cabinets, a forgotten chair here and there. Nothing out of place, no movement, no sound, no threat. We finished our sweep, exchanged the usual nod, and stepped back out into the main hallway. That's when I noticed something off. The light. The single overhead light at our end of the hallway, the one that had greeted us when the elevator doors first opened, was now off. But the hallway wasn't completely dark. Another light had come on, right over the elevator. I turned slowly toward my partner. His face had gone pale, stone white. "What's wrong?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. He didn't take his eyes off the hallway as he spoke. "Weren't all those doors we just checked closed and locked?" My stomach dropped. "Yeah," I said, carefully. "Why?" He didn't reply, just tilted his head slightly, motioning down the corridor. I turned. All the office doors we had just finished clearing were now wide open, every single one, swinging slightly as if someone had walked through them just before we stepped out. That's when the fear really settled in. that quiet, skin-tightening sensation that creeps up your back when something isn't just wrong, it's wrong in a way you can't explain. We didn't waste time. We started re-clearing the offices, one after another, trying to make sense of what the hell was happening. Our breaths were shorter now, our grips tighter on our flashlights and sidearms. Nothing. Again. No sign of entry, no footprints, no sound. Just that heavy, suffocating silence and a hallway that felt like it was watching us. Finally, we cleared the last room. We were just about to step around the corner into the main waiting area when, bang! The main entrance door slammed shut behind us, hard, like someone had kicked it closed. Both of us jumped, weapons raised instinctively. Before we could say anything, our radios burst to life. But it wasn't dispatch. It wasn't even a voice. Just static. High-pitched, warbling, almost rhythmic. Like something was trying to break through. The feedback hissed and screeched through both our radios at once, drowning the hallway in electric noise. We froze, and for the first time in a long time, I felt real fear. At that point, I just wanted to get the hell out. Whatever this place was, whatever it had become, it wasn't somewhere we were supposed to be. We made a beeline for the elevator, eyes flicking over our shoulders, every shadow now feeling like it held breath. As soon as the doors slid open, we stepped in and hit the button for the first floor. The doors closed behind us with a quiet ding, far too polite for what we just experienced. When we reached the lobby, our first thought was to reconnect with the key holder, the guy who'd let us in earlier. But he was gone. No sign of him. We called out, checked around the parking lot. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished without a trace. Confused, I radioed dispatch and asked if they could patch me through to the key holder, just so I could advise him about what we'd found upstairs. That's when things got weird. Dispatch responded, "Key holder is still en route. ETA is 5 minutes." I froze. I keyed the mic again. "Negative," I said carefully. "We were already out with the key holder. He met us out front and let us in." There was a pause. Then dispatch came back. "Can you give us a call?" I pulled out my cell and dialed the dispatch line directly. The woman who answered sounded unsettled. Her tone clipped, serious. "There's no way you were out with the key holder," she said. "The alarm company just made contact with one. They've only now confirmed who's responding." My mouth went dry. I looked around the lobby. Empty, still. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Then the real key holder arrived. A woman in her early 50s, neatly dressed, apologizing for the delay as she hurried toward the front door. I stopped her outside and gently asked, "Ma'am, there was a man here earlier. He said he was the key holder. He let us in. Can I ask, do you know who that was?" She blinked, confused. What man? I gave her a quick description. Tall, late 50s maybe, balding, wore a white coat over dress clothes like he'd just stepped out of a clinic. Her face changed. She stared at me for a moment too long before answering. That sounds like one of the doctors who used to lease space on the second floor, end of the hall. I felt the air in my lungs freeze. Then she said it, flat, emotionless, like she didn't quite believe the words herself. He died a few days ago. Suicide. At his summer home. My heart thudded once, hard. And then, nothing. Just silence between us. It started with a routine call. Nothing unusual. A resident in the village had reported strange noises coming from one of the old buildings across the street. It was most likely trespassers, kids maybe, or someone looking for shelter. I didn't expect much, just another call to clear. I arrived at the location, an abandoned two-story building that had once been a convenience store. Now it was nothing but a husk, stripped bare, no signage, no product displays, just the skeleton of what it used to be. The only things that remained were the counters and shelving units, fixtures bolted into the floor, too heavy or too worthless to bother stealing. The power had long since been cut. The interior was swallowed in darkness, the kind that presses in from every angle and makes your own breathing sound louder than it should. Flashlight in hand, I started my sweep. The aisles were narrow and empty, nothing but dust, debris, and broken glass crunching under my boots. I moved slowly, checking each gap, corner, and shelf where someone might try to hide. Nothing. Then I made my way upstairs. The second floor had once been storage, maybe even an office space. Now it was just space. Cold, silent, and stripped bare. The walls were stained with age and water damage. Pieces of plaster had crumbled away, exposing the wooden frame underneath. Still, I cleared it, just like the floor below. Every room, every wall, every corner, empty. Satisfied it was clear, I headed back outside, down the creaking staircase and into the cool night air. As I stepped toward my car, I instinctively glanced back at the building. That's when I saw her. A figure at the second floor window. A woman. She was just standing there, perfectly still, facing me. Her hair was long and gray, spilling down past her shoulders like tangled string. Even from the street, I could see her smile, wide, unnatural, stretched too far. She was staring straight at me. I didn't hesitate. I bolted back inside, taking the stairs 2 at a time. I cleared that second floor again, hard and fast, reaching the window in under 10 seconds. But the room was empty. The window was bare, no figure, no sign that anyone had been there. I stood frozen for a moment, scanning every inch with the beam of my flashlight. I checked behind the counter, in the shadows, in the cramped, moldy bathroom. I checked all 3 aisles again and again, 10 times, maybe more. My pulse pounded in my ears the whole time. But there was no one, no woman, no movement, nothing but dust, silence, and that sense that something was wrong. I wanted to believe my eyes had played a trick on me, that maybe, just maybe, it was the stress of the shift or a flicker of light reflecting off the glass. But deep down, I knew better. Still, I made my way back outside, nervous now, and climbed into my cruiser. I sat for a moment, staring up at the window. It was still empty. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been seen. I glanced up at the window one last time before driving off, and froze. She was there again. Same window, same expression. That same mockingly wide, twisted smile stretching across her face, unblinking, intentional, like she knew exactly what she was doing. It felt personal this time. I threw the car into park and bolted back into the building, charging up the stairs 2 at a time. My flashlight beam bounced wildly off the walls as I reached the top floor again, heart hammering against my ribs. This time, I didn't move methodically. I sprinted through each aisle, one after the other, frantic now. My breath echoed through the empty structure, catching in my throat. Nothing. No footsteps, no voice, no movement. It was like she'd vanished again. I was about to give up, convinced I was chasing shadows, when something caught my eye. Not in front of me, above. A flicker of motion in my peripheral vision, just at the edge of my flashlight's reach. I stopped cold and slowly tilted my head upward. There, clinging to the ceiling, was a blotch of darkness that didn't belong. I aimed my light, and there she was. That same woman, pressed flat against the ceiling like some kind of nightmare insect. Her limbs were twisted, contorted, hands gripping 2 rusted, hook-like anchors embedded into the ceiling's frame. Her feet were braced against the sagging tiles, her body coiled like a predator waiting to drop. She stared down at me, still smiling. But now it was more than disturbing. It was delighted, playful, cruel. That look told me exactly what this was. A game. She was toying with me. Not in some light-hearted way, not with confusion or fear. This was intentional. There was a dark intelligence behind those eyes, like she wanted me to see her, like she'd chosen me. I couldn't process it, couldn't understand how she was doing it, how she could cling to the ceiling like that. My mind scrambled to explain it away. Adrenaline, drugs, some kind of break from reality. But the way she moved, it wasn't human. I cuffed her as soon as I could and got her into the back of the cruiser. She didn't resist. In fact, she barely moved. But the whole way down to the station, she stared at me. Not directly, through the rear view mirror. Her eyes were locked on mine, unmoving, unblinking. The smile never left her face. It was like she was burning her image into me. I've dealt with people who were high, sick, disturbed, but this was something else entirely. Something colder, calculated. To this day, I don't know if she had some kind of severe mental illness, or if I had just come face to face with something that enjoyed wearing the shape of a person. All I know is I've never driven faster in my life. In all my years serving as a police officer in Floyd County, Georgia, I've only encountered 2 moments that genuinely shook me to my core. This was the worst of the 2. It happened on a slow night, one of those long stretches where the silence presses against the windows of your cruiser, and every little movement feels amplified. I was out patrolling the back roads, winding, unpaved, forgotten routes flanked by dense, narrow strips of woods on either side. Nothing but trees, shadows, and dirt for miles. Then it started. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, quick and sudden. Someone darting into the woods on the left side of the road. I only caught a glimpse, half a body mid-stride, and then they were gone, swallowed by the darkness. I pulled the cruiser over, rolled to a stop, and angled the spotlight toward where I'd seen them vanish. The beam cut through the trees, slicing shadows apart, but revealed nothing. Just leaves, brush, emptiness. Still, it was my job to check it out. Whether it was a trespasser, a runaway, or just a local drunk, I had to make sure. I stepped out of the car, hesitant. The night air was thick, humid, and unsettlingly quiet. Each footstep crunched against the gravel like a firecracker in the silence. My hand hovered over my holster, fingers twitching, nerves already on edge. I scanned the tree line. Then, snap. The unmistakable sound of a branch breaking just behind one of the trees ahead. It felt almost scripted, like something out of a cheap horror movie. But in that moment, it was anything but funny. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to turn back, to get in the cruiser and call for backup. But I swallowed the fear and did my job. I called out, my voice firm but shaking slightly. "Come out, now!" And someone did. From behind a thick tree trunk, a figure stepped forward. They were wearing a mask. Not a ski mask or something tactical. This was the kind you'd find at a costume store. Pale, featureless, a frozen, expressionless face staring right through me. I tightened my stance. "Raise your hands. Take off the mask. Come toward me, slowly." The figure lifted their arms, compliant but not quite right. The movements were fluid, too calm. They just stood there, hands in the air, but they didn't remove the mask. I raised my voice, more authoritative this time, trying to snap them out of whatever game this was. I said, "Take it off, now." The figure tilted their head slightly, like they were about to obey. Then, without warning, they turned their head to the left. Just a quick glance, like they heard something. Then they looked right back at me. And that's when I heard it too. Footsteps from my right, fast, crunching leaves, snapping twigs, getting closer. I drew my gun immediately and turned, yelling at the top of my lungs, my voice tearing through the stillness. "Hands up! Everyone, show your hands right now!" But no one came out. Just the forest, still and watchful, and that masked figure still standing there. You might be wondering why I didn't act sooner, why I didn't fire, why I didn't run right then and there. But I promise you, if you had been in my boots, standing in that pitch-black stretch of forest with shadows moving all around you, you'd have been shitting yourself too, just like I was. Because another figure stepped out from the trees, also masked. This one was holding an axe. Not a small hatchet, an honest-to-God, wood-splitting, rust-covered axe. Its head glinted faintly under the moonlight, the metal dulled by time, but still sharp enough to kill. I kept my gun trained on him, my finger tense on the trigger. But before I could decide what to do, I heard more. Footsteps from behind. Then the left. Then the right. They were coming from every direction. Leaves rustled, branches cracked. I spun in place, flashlight beams swinging wildly across the trees. I was surrounded. At least 10 people. 10 masked figures, slowly emerging from the woods, closing in on me in near perfect silence. They moved without urgency, deliberate, practiced, like they'd done this before. Their faces were hidden behind all kinds of masks. Some looked homemade, others store-bought, all of them unsettling in the worst way. They didn't speak. They didn't shout. They just stared. Half of them were armed, axes, machetes, even one holding what looked like a rusty crowbar. They formed a loose circle around me, just wide enough for me to recognize I was trapped. All except for one thing. Behind me, there was a gap, an opening, a way out. I stood there, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. My gun was still raised, but I wasn't even pointing it at anything anymore, just shifting back and forth between figures, trying to keep them all in view, knowing it was impossible. My stomach turned. I genuinely thought I was about to vomit, right there, in the middle of the woods, surrounded by masked strangers whose intentions I couldn't begin to guess. And then, finally, one of them spoke. I don't know which. The voice was low, muffled, distorted by the mask. "Go away," That's all. Just 2 words. But the way he said it, it wasn't a threat. It wasn't a challenge. It was permission. It was mercy. The kind of mercy that says, you weren't supposed to see this. You're not who we want. Leave while you still can. And I took it. Without a word, I turned and bolted toward the gap behind me, tearing through the trees like a wild animal. My breath came out in sharp, painful bursts. My flashlight swung with each step. I didn't dare look back. I dove into the cruiser, slammed the door, and floored it down the dirt road, tires spitting gravel into the night. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. Half a mile later, I got on the radio, choking out a call for backup. By the time the search squad arrived, the woods were empty. No footprints, no voices, no masks, no axe, nothing. Just trees. I've replayed that night more times than I can count, and the more I think about it, the more I believe I wasn't the intended target. Here's my theory. Call it crazy if you want. I think I stumbled across something I was never meant to see. Some kind of secret society, a ritual, a gathering, something dark and hidden, something that doesn't want to be understood. And I think that first person, the one who jumped into the woods when I drove past, they recognized the cruiser, realized I was law enforcement, and that's what saved me. Had I been just some random person out walking, a curious hiker, a lost traveler, I think they would have stopped me, led me in. And whatever this group does out there in the dark, whatever twisted game or ritual they perform, I think I would have been part of it. The kind you don't walk away from.